She was bleeding at 30,000 feet, and the woman who hit her was already smiling, certain the world would take her side. The cabin had gone quiet in that unnatural way that only happens when people sense danger, but don't yet know where to place it. A few seconds earlier, the soundscape had been ordinary. The soft whir of overhead vents, the faint clink of glassware from first class, the low murmur of boarding announcements echoing down the aisle. Now there was only breath, sharp, held, uneven. Evelyn Crawford stood in the aisle of the first-class cabin like she owned it, 55 years old, perfect posture, hair styled into a controlled blonde wave that did not move even when she did. Her Chanel blazer sat on her shoulders like armor, cream-colored, immaculate, tailored to signal money without ever saying it out loud. Her jaw was tight, her lips thin, her eyes hard and bright with a particular kind of confidence that comes from decades of being obeyed. In front of her, frozen mid-step, was a young woman who clearly did not belong to Evelyn's mental picture of first class. Jordan Mitchell, 26. Slim, tired, dressed in a faded grey hoodie, soft at the elbows, the fabric stretched thin from too many washes. Worn jeans, scuffed sneakers, a heavy medical textbook pressed tight against her chest like a shield. Her breath came fast, shallow, the way it does when the body realizes it has just become a target. It had started with a spill, or rather a near spill, a stumble, a hand reaching out for balance, fingers brushing fabric. Nothing more than that. But in Evelyn's world, intention didn't matter. Only hierarchy did. "Don't touch me," Evelyn had snapped, loud enough for half the cabin to hear, recoiling as if she'd been burned. Jordan had already stepped back, her eyes wide, her voice soft. "I'm sorry, Mom. I tripped. I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to." The phrase seemed to offend Evelyn more than the contact itself. She looked Jordan up and down slowly, deliberately, as if cataloguing every perceived flaw. The hoodie, the backpack, the book, the skin. Her mouth curled, not quite a smile, more like a verdict forming. "Watch where you're going," Evelyn said. "This is first class." The implication hung there, thick and ugly. This space was not for people like you. A few passengers shifted in their seats. A man across the aisle, mid-40s, navy suit, loosened tie, paused his typing and glanced up, then quickly back down. A woman near the window adjusted her silk scarf, eyes fixed straight ahead. No one spoke. Silence was easier. Silence was safer. Ryan Cooper, the flight attendant, was already moving toward them. Early 30s. Dark circles under his eyes from a double shift the night before. His smile was calm, professional, carefully neutral. He had learned long ago that tone mattered more than words in moments like this. "Ma'am," he said gently, positioning himself just enough to break the line between them. "We're still boarding. The aisle's tight. I'm sure it was an accident." Evelyn turned on him slowly. Her eyes flicked to his name tag, then back to his face. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Are you telling me," she said, measured and cold, "that I imagined it?" Ryan held her gaze. A fraction too long. long enough to be noticed. No, ma'am. I'm saying no one meant any harm. That was when something shifted in Evelyn, a subtle tightening around her eyes, a flare of irritation. She was not used to being corrected, especially not by airline staff, especially not in front of witnesses. She waved a manicured hand dismissively. Just get her out of my space. Jordan swallowed. Her fingers tightened around the book. She could feel the heat crawling up her neck, the familiar mix of embarrassment and anger she had learned to bury deep. She had dealt with this before. In lecture halls, in libraries, in places where people looked at her clothes and decided she didn't belong. She had promised herself she would not make a scene. Not today. This flight mattered. I'll go, Jordan said quietly, already turning toward the back of the plane. As she passed, Evelyn leaned closer, her voice dropping, sharp and intimate. People like you should learn where you fit. Jordan flinched. Just a little. Enough to notice if you were looking closely. Ryan saw it. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. There were rules, and there were consequences for breaking them. He watched Jordan disappear past the curtain into economy, her shoulders stiff, her head high in that fragile way that meant she was holding herself together by force. Evelyn sat back down, smoothing her blazer, heart pounding with a satisfaction she would never name. She reached for her glass of champagne, took a long sip, and exhaled. That's better, she muttered. The plane continued boarding. The curtain closed. First class returned to its curated calm. Leather seats, low lighting, the illusion of civility restored. But something had been cracked open. In row 34, seat B, Jordan lowered herself into her seat. The overhead light cast a harsh glow over the pages of her book. Diagrams of the human brain. Pathways. Synapses. Neuroplasticity. Words she knew. Concepts she trusted. Facts that did not judge her. Her hands shook as she flipped to the page she had marked earlier. She pressed her lips together, breathing slowly, counting it out the way she had learned. In. Hold. Out. Across the cabin, unseen, Evelyn ordered another drink. Her laugh rang out briefly, sharp and core-confident, cutting through the soft hum of the engines starting to spin. None of them knew it yet, but this was not a misunderstanding. It was an opening move. And somewhere between New York and London, the balance of power on this aircraft was already shifting, quietly, inexorably, toward a reckoning no one in first class was prepared for. The plane leveled off into a thin band of cloud, and the illusion of calm settled in like a lie everyone silently agreed to believe. In first class, Evelyn Crawford reclined her seat a fraction more than necessary, the soft mechanical whir sounding indulgent rather than functional. She crossed her legs slowly, deliberately, one ankle resting on the other, a pose she had practiced for years in mirrors and reflections. Control was something you performed as much as you possessed. She glanced toward the closed curtain separating her from the rest of the aircraft, lips pressed together, then lifted her hand. "Excuse me," she said, not raising her voice. She never raised her voice when she expected obedience. Ryan appeared almost immediately. "Yes, ma'am." "My champagne is warm," Evelyn said, holding the flute by the stem. careful not to smudge the glass. I asked for it chilled. Ryan took it from her with a nod. I'll replace it right away. Please do, she replied, eyes already back on her tablet. Service standards really have declined. He turned away, jaw tight. In the galley, he placed the glass down harder than he meant to. The sound was small, but it echoed in his chest. He inhaled slowly. This flight was full. Long. International. The kind where one wrong move could follow you for years. In economy, the lighting was harsher, the air warmer, the seats closer together. Jordan Mitchell sat rigid in seat 34B, textbook open, pen poised but unmoving. The words on the page blurred. She blinked, forcing focus. The encounter replayed in her mind against her will. The look, the tone. The way the woman's eyes had slid over her as if she were debris in the aisle. She adjusted her headphones, pressing them over her ears even though no music played. Silence felt safer than the low murmur of other passengers. A man beside her shifted, clearing his throat. A child somewhere behind kicked the back of a seat. Normal sounds. Ordinary. She tried to anchor herself to them. Jordan's reflection stared back at her from the dark screen of her phone. She barely recognized herself. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled back hastily that morning, curls escaping. She looked younger than she was. Smaller. Easier to dismiss. She flipped the page. Forced herself to read. Neurons adapt. Pathways strengthen with repetition. The brain learns to survive what it is exposed to. In first class, Evelyn accepted her new drink with a satisfied nod. The glass was colder. Better. She took a slow sip, eyes half closed, savoring the sensation. The tension she'd carried earlier had softened into something sharper. Not anger. Something closer to anticipation. She leaned toward the man across the aisle, a silver-haired executive type who had not spoken since boarding. "Can you believe how crowded flights have become?" she said, as if inviting agreement rather than conversation. "Anyone can buy a ticket now." He smiled thinly, non-committal. "Times change." "Yes," Evelyn replied. "Unfortunately." She glanced again at the curtain. Her thoughts drifted back to the girl, the hoodie, the book, that quiet apology. There had been something about it that bothered her more than open defiance would have. No fear, just restraint. Evelyn had spent her life surrounded by people who flinched. She finished her drink faster than she realized and lifted her hand again. In economy, the seatbelt sign flicked off. A collective exhale rippled through the cabin. People stood, stretched, reached for overhead bins. Jordan remained seated. She preferred stillness, preferred control over her own space. She reached into her backpack and touched the small velvet case hidden in the inner pocket. Just for a second, a grounding gesture. She didn't open it, didn't need to. The weight alone was enough. A flight attendant passed, offering water. Jordan shook her head. Her stomach churned. 2 rows up, a woman whispered to her companion, eyes darting toward Jordan's book. "Med school," she murmured. "That's impressive." Jordan heard it anyway. She felt a flicker of something warm and unwelcome. Validation, felt dangerous. She pushed it away. In first class, Evelyn stood. The motion was sudden enough that Ryan, returning with a tray, paused mid-step. "Ma'am?" "I need the restroom," Evelyn said. "Now." "The first-class lavatory is occupied at the moment," he replied carefully. "I can let you know as soon as—" She waved him off. "There's one in the back?" Ryan hesitated. "That's for economy passengers." Evelyn smiled without warmth. "I'm sure no one will mind." She stepped past him before he could respond, heels clicking sharply against the aisle floor. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. She moved through the curtain like it was meant for her, fabric brushing her shoulders. The shift in atmosphere was immediate. Louder, closer, less refined. She wrinkled her nose almost imperceptibly. Her eyes found Jordan instantly. Jordan felt it before she saw it, the prickle along her spine, the sense of being watched. She looked up. Evelyn stood in the aisle, blocking the path, gaze locked on her like a spotlight. Her lips curved slightly, not in greeting, but in recognition. "Well," Evelyn said. "There you are." Jordan removed one headphone. "Yes?" "You're shaking your leg," Evelyn said, voice carrying. "It's disturbing." Jordan glanced down. Her foot stilled. "I'm sorry." Evelyn leaned closer. Too close. Some people have no awareness of how they affect others. Jordan met her gaze. Just for a second. There was something in her eyes then. Not defiance, not fear. Assessment. "I'll be still," Jordan said, calm but clipped. She reached to put her headphone back on. Evelyn's hand shot out and ripped it away. The sound was sharp, plastic snapping against skin. Gasps rippled through nearby rows. "I'm speaking to you," Evelyn said loudly. "Do not ignore me." Jordan stood. Slowly. Her heart hammered, but her voice was steady. "Please leave me alone." "You don't get to tell me what to do," Evelyn snapped. "Not after the way you behaved earlier." "What way?" Jordan asked. Her hands were open at her sides. Non-threatening. Controlled. "You touched me," Evelyn said. "You disrespected me." "That was an accident." Evelyn laughed, short and brittle. "Of course it was." She glanced down at the open textbook on the tray table. "Trying to look important," she said. "Big words don't make you belong." She swept her hand across the table. The book hit the floor with a heavy thud. Pages splayed, a corner bent. Something in the cabin shifted. A low murmur. Phones lifted. Eyes widened. Jordan stared at the book. Then she looked up. "Pick it up," Evelyn said. The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Jordan did not move. Ryan's voice cut in from behind Evelyn. "Ma'am, that's enough." Evelyn turned on him, eyes blazing. "Stay out of this." "No," Ryan said, louder now. "You need to return to your seat." Evelyn felt it then. The stares, the cameras, the judgment she had always assumed flowed only one way. Her face flushed. Heat crawled up her neck. "This is harassment," she said, pointing at Jordan. "She's provoking me." Jordan's voice was quiet. "You came to me." For a split second, Evelyn hesitated. Then she raised her hand. The sound was unmistakable, flesh against flesh, a sharp crack that echoed through the cabin. Jordan staggered back, hitting her seat. Pain exploded across her face. Warmth rushed down her nose. She tasted iron. Someone screamed. Evelyn stood there, breathing hard, eyes wide, stunned by her own action, and yet unwilling to retreat. "That's what happens," she said, voice shaking, "when you don't know your place." Jordan looked up, blood dripping onto her hoodie, and in her eyes there was no fear left at all. The blood hit the fabric first, dark and immediate, soaking into the grey cotton as if it had been waiting for permission. Jordan's hand came up on instinct. She touched her nose, then pulled her fingers back and stared at them, red and shaking. The world narrowed to sensation. The sting, the pressure, the sound of her own breathing, loud and uneven in her ears. Around her, voices blurred into noise without shape. Someone gasped. Someone else swore under their breath. A phone clattered to the floor. Evelyn Crawford stood frozen for half a heartbeat, her hand still raised, rings flashing under the cabin lights. Pain radiated up her arm where bone had met bone, but she barely noticed. What she saw was the blood. Too much blood. Real blood. Not the symbolic kind she was used to inflicting with words. Then her face hardened. "That's what you get," she said, loud enough to be heard. "When you push people." Jordan did not scream. That seemed to disturb people more than if she had. She stayed seated, shoulders pressed back against the headrest, eyes lifted, locked on Evelyn, with an expression that was no longer startled or hurt. It was focused, measuring, as if something inside her had clicked into place. Ryan was there now, between them, his body angled protectively without conscious thought. His voice came out sharper than he intended. "Do not move," Evelyn scoffed. "Don't touch me." Behind Ryan, two men stood from their seats almost simultaneously. One tall, broad-shouldered, early 40s. The other younger, lean, jaw clenched tight. They didn't speak. They just stepped closer, the way men do when they sense a line has been crossed and the next move matters. Ryan keyed his radio with a trembling thumb. "Captain, we have an assault in the cabin. Repeat, assault. Passenger injured." The word landed heavy. Assault. Not disagreement. Not disturbance. Assault. In the rows around them, people stared openly now. Phones were raised, no longer discreet. A woman pressed a napkin into Jordan's hand, her eyes wide and apologetic. "Hold this," she whispered. "Press hard." Jordan took it, nodding once. The white fabric bloomed red almost instantly. Evelyn's chest heaved. She glanced around, finally registering the shift. The stares were not admiring. They were not fearful. They were something else. Witnessing. "You can't do this to me," she said, her voice rising. "I'm a premium passenger." Ryan didn't look at her. "Ma'am, you are being detained." Detained. Another word she had never expected to hear, applied to herself. She laughed, brittle and loud. This is ridiculous. She attacked me. Jordan spoke then, softly. You hit me. The simplicity of it cut through the noise. Ryan turned back to Evelyn. You need to sit down. Now. She took a step back, then another, cornered by eyes and bodies. The two men moved in, not rough but firm, guiding her toward an empty seat across the aisle. She resisted, pulling away, heels scraping. Get your hands off me, she shrieked. Do you know who I am? They did not answer. They didn't need to. She was forced into the seat. One man held her wrists down against the armrests, while the other stood guard. Evelyn's breath came fast now, shallow, fear threading through the anger whether she wanted it or not. Jordan leaned forward slightly, dizzy, but upright. The pain in her face pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She could feel swelling already, pressure building behind her eyes. She knew these symptoms. She had studied them, lived with the knowledge of how quickly things could go wrong. The intercom crackled. The captain's voice came through, controlled but tight. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We are assessing a situation. The plane did not divert yet. It hovered in a moment suspended between outcomes. Ryan knelt beside Jordan. Are you okay? She met his eyes. I need a minute. He nodded, relief flickering across his face at her clarity. He signaled to another attendant to bring the medical kit. Evelyn watched all of this, disbelief hardening into something close to panic. This was not how it was supposed to go. She had expected shock, submission, an apology, not procedure. She leaned forward as much as the men allowed. This is absurd, she said. I will sue this airline into the ground. No one reacted. In the row behind Jordan, a young man whispered to his phone, still recording. She just hit her. She just hit her. The words echoed softly, spreading. Jordan closed her eyes briefly. The cabin noise faded again, replaced by a low hum. She felt the weight in her pocket, heavier now. Present, waiting. When she opened her eyes, she stood. Ryan reached out instinctively. Miss, please sit. Wait, Jordan said. Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. It carried anyway. She straightened slowly, ignoring the wave of dizziness that threatened to pull her back down. She lowered the blood-soaked napkin, just enough for everyone to see her face. The damage was clear. Swollen lip, crooked nose, blood drying along her chin. I need the cockpit, she said. Ryan blinked. What? I need you to use the flight deck phone, she continued. Calm, precise. Now. Evelyn laughed again, a high, strained sound. This is unbelievable. She's giving orders now. Jordan did not look at her. Ryan hesitated. Training screamed at him to follow protocol. Instinct screamed something else. He saw the way Jordan stood, even injured, the steadiness, the absence of panic. What's your name? He asked quietly. Jordan reached into her pocket. The movement drew immediate attention. The two men tensed. Evelyn's eyes widened. Jordan pulled out a wallet and opened it with deliberate care. Inside was not a driver's license. Ryan saw the black edge first, the gold seal, the emblem he recognized from briefings and whispered warnings during training. The kind of credential you were told never to question if you ever saw it in real life. His breath caught. "Use the phone," Jordan said again, her voice colder now. "Different. And tell the captain Director Jordan Hale is on board." The words fell into the cabin like a dropped instrument. Ryan's face drained of color. He looked from the badge to Jordan, then back again, as if his eyes might be lying to him. "Director," he whispered before he could stop himself. Evelyn stopped struggling. "What did you say?" she snapped, her voice cracking. Jordan finally turned her head. For the first time since boarding, she looked directly at Evelyn Crawford. And in that look, there was no anger, no satisfaction, only judgment. Clean and absolute. "Sit still," Jordan said. "You're going to want to hear this." The cabin felt smaller the moment Ryan stepped away, as if the air itself had thickened under the weight of what had just been said. He moved backward toward the galley in a daze, one hand still clutching the open wallet, like it might vanish if he blinked. The emblem stared up at him, gold against black, unmistakable. He had seen it once before, years ago, in a training slide that came with a warning, spoken half as a joke, half as a threat. If you ever see this in real life, stop talking and start listening. Behind him, the low murmur of the passengers grew into something sharper. Confusion layered over shock. People leaned into aisles, phones lifted higher. Whispers rippled outward in uneven waves. "Director." The word echoed, passed from mouth to mouth without context, without understanding, but heavy all the same. Evelyn Crawford sat rigid in the seat, her wrists still pinned by unfamiliar hands. Her face had gone pale beneath the makeup, the flush of anger drained away and replaced by something raw. Her eyes darted from Jordan to Ryan to the badge and back again, searching for a version of reality where this still ended in her favor. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice lacked conviction now. "That's fake. Anyone can print a badge." Jordan Hale did not respond. She reached for the napkin again and pressed it gently to her nose, adjusting the angle with clinical precision. Blood still seeped through, slower now, darker. Her breathing was controlled, measured, every movement economical, as if pain were an inconvenience rather than a threat. Ryan reached the galley and nearly tripped over his own feet. He grabbed the flight deck phone, fingers slick with sweat, and stared at the keypad. For a brief, terrifying moment, he couldn't remember the code. His heart pounded so hard it felt like it might break something loose inside his chest. "Ryan." Jordan's voice cut through the noise without rising. "Now." He swallowed and punched in the numbers. The line clicked, static. Then the captain's voice, low and tense. "Go ahead." Ryan exhaled shakily. "Captain, this is Ryan in the cabin. We have a situation." "I am aware of the assault," the captain replied. "We're preparing to, sir." Ryan interrupted, then immediately winced. He had never interrupted a captain before. "The injured passenger has identified herself." There was a pause. "Identified how?" Ryan looked back toward the aisle. Jordan stood there, bloodied, upright, utterly still amid the chaos. She did not look like someone asking for help. She looked like someone waiting for compliance. She presented credentials, Ryan said. Board level, global compliance, silence, the kind of silence that stretches too long to be comfortable. Repeat that, the captain said finally. His tone altered, sharper, stripped of authority, and replaced with attention. Ryan's throat tightened. Director Jordan Hale is on board. She's requesting immediate contact. Another pause. Longer this time. Then a breath. Slow. Controlled. Understood, the captain said. Do not proceed with any diversion until I arrive at the cabin. The line went dead. Ryan stood there for a second longer, phone still pressed to his ear, before lowering it carefully, like setting down a weapon. He turned and walked back down the aisle, every step heavy with consequence. As he approached, the crowd parted instinctively. Eyes followed him, searching his face for confirmation. He didn't offer any. Jordan met his gaze. He's coming. Yes, Director, Ryan said automatically. The word felt strange in his mouth. Too big. Too final. Evelyn let out a short, broken laugh. You're enjoying this, she said, her voice pitched high. This little performance. Jordan tilted her head slightly. Number. She gestured with her chin toward the men restraining Evelyn. Restrain her properly. The men hesitated only a fraction of a second before adjusting their grip, pulling Evelyn's arms back more securely. She gasped, pain flaring through her shoulders. You can't do this, Evelyn said, panic breaking through now. I'm not a criminal. Jordan looked at her then. Really looked. Took in the expensive clothes, the trembling mouth, the eyes darting for escape. You assaulted someone on an aircraft, Jordan said. That makes you a risk. The words were simple, clinical, unemotional. They landed harder than any insult. In the rows nearby, someone whispered, "Oh my God," another voice murmured, "She's in trouble." The captain appeared at the front of the cabin moments later, uniform jacket on, expression tight. He moved with purpose, eyes scanning the scene, taking in the blood, the restraints, the phones, the badge still visible in Jordan's hand. He stopped in front of her and did not hesitate. Director Hale, he said, voice steady but deferential. I am deeply sorry for what has occurred on this flight. Jordan nodded once. Thank you, Captain. Evelyn stared at them, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. This was not happening. This could not be happening. People like her did not lose control of narratives. They shaped them. What's going on? She demanded. Why is he talking to her like that? No one answered. The captain turned slightly, addressing the cabin without raising his voice. Ladies and gentlemen, we are diverting this flight to the nearest major hub. Please remain seated. A collective intake of breath followed. Phones buzzed. Someone muttered an oath. Jordan closed her eyes briefly. The motion sent a spike of pain through her skull, but she ignored it. She focused on the task ahead, on containment, on process. She opened her eyes and looked at Ryan. Prepare restraints. Yes, Director. Evelyn shook her head violently. No. No, you don't get to do this. My husband is not relevant. Jordan said. The captain watched as the plastic restraints were retrieved, his jaw tightening. He did not intervene. He understood the hierarchy now. As the restraints were applied, Evelyn's composure finally shattered. Tears spilled down her face, smearing mascara, turning carefully crafted elegance into something desperate and exposed. "This is a misunderstanding," she sobbed. "I didn't mean to hurt her." Jordan watched without expression. Intent doesn't erase impact. The cabin fell quiet again, but this time the silence was different, heavy with realization, with shame, with the dawning awareness that they had witnessed a turning point they would not forget. Somewhere in the back, a child asked a parent what was happening. The parent didn't answer. Jordan eased herself back into her seat slowly, the adrenaline draining just enough for exhaustion to creep in. She pressed the napkin to her face again, feeling the ache deepen. The medical kit arrived, hands gentle, voices low. As the plane began its slow turn in the sky, the balance of power had fully shifted, and every person on board felt it, whether they understood why or not. The turn was gentle, almost polite, but the change in direction carried weight, the kind that settled into the bones. Jordan felt it first in her ears, then in the subtle shift of pressure behind her eyes. She adjusted the napkin again, accepting the antiseptic smell of the medical kit as Ryan worked carefully, his hands steady now, grounded by procedure. He avoided her eyes, not out of disrespect, but reverence, the kind that comes when someone realizes too late they have misjudged the scale of another person. "I'm going to clean this," he said quietly. Jordan nodded. "Go ahead." Across the aisle, Evelyn Crawford sat restrained, plastic cuffs biting into her wrists, breath hitching between sobs and shallow gasps. Her head throbbed. Her mouth tasted like metal and panic. She kept glancing toward the front of the cabin, as if expecting someone to appear and undo what had been done. A lawyer, a husband, a familiar authority. No one came. A woman 2 rows back leaned toward her seatmate, whispering, "She did that. On a plane." The words carried, sharp and incredulous. Another voice murmured, "They're diverting because of her." Evelyn squeezed her eyes shut. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. She had been certain that status insulated her, certain that rules bent for people like her. She had never imagined a scenario where the rules arrived all at once, uncompromising, unforgiving. Jordan listened to the murmurs without reacting. She focused on her breathing, slow and even, the way she had been taught when her heart threatened to race ahead of her judgment. She catalogued symptoms clinically. Pain localized, swelling increasing. No loss of consciousness. Possible fracture. Concussion risk. She would need imaging. Soon. Ryan finished cleaning and stepped back. "We'll have medical personnel waiting when we land," he said. "Federal agents," the captain corrected quietly from nearby. Ryan swallowed. "Yes, sir." The captain turned to Jordan. "Director, is there anything else you need?" She considered the question, thought of the files waiting on her secure device, thought of the months of quiet preparation that had led her onto this flight under a name no one recognized, into a seat no one thought mattered. "Yes," she said. "Make sure the satellite link is fully active." The captain nodded immediately. Already done. In the economy cabin, the shift from confusion to clarity continued to ripple. Phones buzzed with notifications. Messages were being sent. Videos uploaded. The incident, raw and unfiltered, began its journey outward, escaping the confines of aluminum and altitude. A man in a baseball cap murmured, "This is going everywhere." His companion replied, "Good." Evelyn heard that too. The word lodged in her chest like a stone. Good. As if her unraveling were deserved. As if she were a lesson. She lifted her head, voice hoarse. "This is harassment," she insisted weakly. "I'm being treated like a criminal." Jordan looked at her then, truly looked and spoke without raising her voice. "You committed a crime." The simplicity of it stripped away the last of Evelyn's defenses. She sagged back against the seat, shoulders shaking, tears flowing freely now, uncontained, the performance abandoned. There was no audience left that believed her. The plane descended gradually, clouds thinning beneath them. The light outside shifted, colder, grayer. Inside, time stretched. Every minute felt longer than the last. Jordan closed her eyes briefly, letting her head rest against the seat. She could feel the ache settling deeper now, exhaustion creeping in as adrenaline faded. She thought of her father, of the first time he had taught her that authority was not volume, not intimidation, but consistency. "Do what you say you will do, and do it every time," he had told her. That's how systems change. Ryan checked the restraints again, ensuring they were secure but not cutting off circulation. He avoided Evelyn's eyes. He avoided Jordan's too, though for different reasons. He had replayed the moment in his head, the moment he almost dismissed the badge, almost hesitated too long. He wondered how many times he had failed others without knowing. The captain returned to the cockpit, leaving the cabin under a strange new order. Conversations were subdued now, hushed, reflective. The energy had shifted from spectacle to reckoning. A woman approached Jordan's row cautiously, holding a bottle of water. "I'm sorry," she said, voice thick with emotion, "for not saying anything earlier." Jordan opened her eyes and met her gaze. "Thank you," she said. "That matters." The woman nodded and returned to her seat, wiping her eyes. As the descent continued, the announcement came. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be landing shortly. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened." Through the window, Jordan could see the city emerging beneath them. A grid of lights and roads, order imposed on chaos. She felt the weight of responsibility settle back into place, familiar and steady. Evelyn stared at the same view and felt something break completely. She imagined headlines, courtrooms, faces she would never see again except on screens. She thought of the life she had curated, the image she had protected, and understood too late how fragile it had always been. The wheels touched down with a muted thud. The plane slowed. Brakes engaged. The cabin held its breath. When the aircraft finally came to a stop, no one moved. The door opened. Cool air rushed in, sharp and real. Footsteps echoed. Voices firm and authoritative approached from the jet bridge. Jordan straightened, ignoring the spike of pain and looked forward. The consequences had arrived. The first sound was boots on metal, heavy and deliberate, echoing through the narrow tube of the jet bridge like a countdown reaching 0. Federal agents boarded without ceremony. Dark jackets, identical posture, faces trained into professional neutrality that carried no curiosity, no sympathy. They moved with the certainty of people who already knew how this would end. Evelyn Crawford felt them before she saw them. The air shifted again, colder now, sharper. This was not airline staff. This was not customer service. This was consequence. "Ma'am," one of the agents said, stopping beside her row. His voice was calm, practiced. "You're under arrest." The word landed with finality. Evelyn's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. Her hands trembled against the restraints. "This is a mistake," she whispered, clinging to the last fragile thread of denial. "I didn't mean to." "Stand up," the agent said. She didn't move. Her legs felt hollow, unreliable, like they belonged to someone else. The second agent stepped closer, now. They lifted her to her feet, not gently, not roughly, just efficiently. The plastic cuffs clicked as they adjusted their grip. Evelyn cried out then, a sound raw and unfiltered, stripped of pride. As they began to guide her down the aisle, every eye followed. No one looked away anymore. Some faces held shock, others held anger. A few held something like satisfaction. Phones were raised openly now, documenting every step of her walk from power to exposure. Evelyn tried to hold her head up. She failed. Her shoulders collapsed inward, her chin dropped. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her heels clicked unevenly against the floor, each step louder than the last. She passed Jordan's row. For a moment, time seemed to slow. Jordan sat still, posture straight despite the pain pulling at her face and skull. Her hands rested on her lap, fingers relaxed. She did not look away. She did not look triumphant. Evelyn lifted her head just enough to meet Jordan's eyes. "You did this," Evelyn whispered, voice cracking. Jordan's reply was quiet, steady. "You did." The agents did not pause. They guided Evelyn forward, through the curtain she had once passed so easily, into a space that no longer belonged to her. The door closed behind them with a sound that felt like punctuation. The cabin exhaled. A low murmur spread, not relief exactly, but release. The tension that had coiled through every row finally loosened, leaving behind exhaustion and disbelief. Ryan stood near Jordan's seat, hands clasped tightly in front of him, shoulders squared. He watched the empty aisle for a long moment before turning back to her. "Medical is waiting," he said softly. Jordan nodded. "I know." She stood carefully, testing her balance. The room tilted briefly, then steadied. She inhaled through her nose and immediately regretted it, pain flaring bright and sharp. She adjusted, breathing through her mouth instead. The captain appeared beside her. "Director Hale," he said, voice low. "We're ready when you are." She looked around the cabin once more, at the people who had watched, the people who had stayed silent, the people who had spoken up too late, but still spoken. She understood them all more than they knew. "Let the passengers deplane," she said. "I'll go last." The captain hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." The doors opened again. This time, the movement was hesitant. People gathered their belongings slowly, glancing toward Jordan as they passed. Some offered quiet apologies. Others offered thanks. A few said nothing, their eyes downcast, the weight of what they had witnessed settling heavily on them. One man stopped briefly, middle-aged, business casual. He met her gaze and nodded once. "You handled that with restraint," he said. "More than most would." Jordan inclined her head. "That's the job." When the cabin finally emptied, the silence returned, deeper now, layered with aftermath. Jordan took a step toward the exit, then paused. Ryan stood there, uncertain. "I should have done more," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "Earlier, I saw it. Jordan studied him for a moment. "You did what you were trained to do," she said. "Now you know where the training fails." He swallowed hard. "I won't forget." "I know," she replied. They walked off the plane together. The terminal lights were harsh, unforgiving. Beyond the glass, vehicles waited. Black SUVs, red and blue lights flashing silently, reflected in polished floors. Jordan felt the weight of the moment finally settle into her body. Her legs shook, her head throbbed. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind pain and fatigue. A medical team approached immediately, voices overlapping, questions rapid. She answered them calmly, efficiently, as if discussing someone else's injuries. As they led her toward a wheelchair, she glanced back once, toward the aircraft. Inside it, a line had been drawn. Not just for one woman, but for everyone who had ever believed that silence was safety and power was permanent. The doors closed behind her, and the night moved forward without apology. The holding room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, a place designed to drain emotion rather than contain it. Jordan sat on the edge of a narrow bench, posture straight despite the dull, relentless pulse behind her eyes. A medic had taped her nose into place with practiced efficiency and warned her again about signs to watch for. Nausea, confusion, light sensitivity. She listened, nodded, filed the information away. Pain was familiar. Loss of control was not. Across the glass partition, she could see movement, shadows passing, voices muffled, the machinery of consequence grinding forward without spectacle now, without cameras or applause. A federal agent stepped in, clipboard in hand. Mid-40s, calm eyes. "Director Hale," he said. "I'm Agent Marcus Levin. I'll be taking your statement." Jordan gestured to the chair opposite her. "Go ahead." He sat, clicking his pen once. "Before we begin, I want to be clear. You're the victim here. We'll move at your pace." She met his gaze. "Let's not waste time." He nodded, respect flickering across his face. "Walk me through what happened." Jordan spoke plainly. She did not embellish. She did not soften. She described the contact, the escalation, the strike. Her voice did not shake. The facts were enough. As she spoke, somewhere else in the building, Evelyn Crawford sat hunched in a metal chair, wrists cuffed to a table, bolted to the floor. The adrenaline had drained from her body, leaving behind a bone-deep chill. Her blazer lay folded on the table, wrinkled now, useless. Her hands trembled. She stared at the wall, replaying the moment again and again, searching for a version where she had stopped herself. There was none. A man in a suit entered, closing the door behind him. Her attorney. She exhaled sharply, relief surging. "Thank God," she whispered. "Get me out of here." He didn't sit. He didn't smile. He placed a tablet on the table and turned it toward her. The video filled the screen. Her voice, her hand, the sound of impact, Jordan's blood. Evelyn recoiled as if struck again. "Turn that off." He didn't. "This has been viewed millions of times already," he said quietly. "And that's not the worst of it." Her breath hitched. "What do you mean?" "The person you assaulted," he continued, "is Director Jordan Hale." Evelyn frowned, confusion battling panic. "So?" He sat. Leaning forward, "She oversees compliance and security across multiple federal transportation systems. She has standing relationships with half the agencies represented in this building." Evelyn's mouth went dry. "And," he added, voice dropping, "her family trust underwrites several of your husband's major loans." The room seemed to tilt. "That's not possible." "It is," he said, "and those loans are being reviewed as we speak." Evelyn's hands curled into fists. "Arthur will fix this." Her attorney looked at her with something close to pity. "Arthur is in another room." The words landed like a blow. Back in the holding room, Jordan finished her statement. Agent Levin nodded, closing his notebook. "Thank you. We'll proceed accordingly." She stood slowly. The room swayed. She steadied herself with one hand on the bench. "Director," Levin said, hesitating. "You should know, the ripple effects are already in motion." Jordan met his eyes. "I expected that." He studied her for a moment. Most people would. She allowed herself a thin, tired smile. "Most people aren't me." Hours later, as dawn crept in through narrow windows, the airport buzzed with a different energy. News vans lined the curb. Headlines scrolled across screens in waiting areas. Faces stared back from phones, frozen mid-gesture, mid-impact. Arthur Crawford stood in a private lounge that no longer felt private, scotch untouched in his hand. His phone vibrated continuously, messages stacking faster than he could read them. Board members, investors, attorneys. Then his assistant's voice came through, shaking. "Sir, the credit lines, they've been frozen." Arthur closed his eyes. He had built his empire on leverage, on confidence, on the assumption that rules bent for men like him. He opened his eyes and saw his reflection in the glass, older than he remembered, smaller. In a quiet room nearby, Jordan sat alone, for the first time since the plane landed. The noise had faded. The urgency had passed. What remained was exhaustion, deep and total. She pulled out her phone and typed a single message to a secure channel. "Incident documented. Proceed." She leaned back and closed her eyes, letting the weight finally settle. Not relief, not satisfaction. Just resolve. Outside, the world argued, commented, judged, chose sides. Inside the line had already been drawn, and it would not move back. Morning arrived without softness, the pale light cutting through glass and steel with the indifference of a verdict already reached. Jordan sat in a quiet executive conference room overlooking the tarmac, a paper cup of coffee cooling untouched in front of her. Her head throbbed in slow, deliberate pulses, each one a reminder that the body always collects its due. The tape across her nose tugged slightly when she breathed. She ignored it. Pain was manageable. Distraction was not. Across the table, 2 men and 1 woman reviewed documents on tablets and paper folders spread like pieces of a puzzle that had been forming long before the flight ever boarded. No one spoke at first. They didn't need to. The information spoke loudly enough. "Timeline is clean," the woman finally said. Early 40s, navy suit, voice calm. Video corroborates her statement. Witness accounts align. Cabin crew actions are documented. Jordan nodded once. "And the Crawfords," one of the men added. "They're unraveling faster than expected." Jordan didn't respond immediately. She looked through the glass instead, watching a plane taxi slowly toward a gate, its passengers unaware of the machinery turning just out of sight. "How fast?" she asked. "Banks froze credit before sunrise," he replied. "Regulatory audits triggered automatically. Media pressure accelerated everything." The woman hesitated, then added, "Arthur Crawford was detained an hour ago." Jordan closed her eyes briefly. Not in triumph, in acknowledgement. She had known this would happen. Systems, when aligned, moved quickly. When exposed, they collapsed under their own weight. In a separate holding facility across the city, Arthur Crawford sat in a narrow room with grey walls and a table that reflected nothing back. His phone lay on the surface in front of him, powered off by request. For the first time in decades, there was no call he could make that would change the outcome. An agent entered and slid a folder toward him. Arthur didn't touch it. "This is about my wife," he said, voice hoarse. "She made a mistake." The agent's expression didn't change. "This is about you." Arthur's jaw tightened. "You don't understand how this works." The agent met his eyes. "We do." Arthur looked down at his hands. They were shaking. He remembered standing in boardrooms, commanding silence. He remembered confidence as a weapon. He wondered when it had turned on him. Back at the airport, Evelyn Crawford stared at the floor of her holding cell, counting cracks in the concrete to keep her thoughts from spiraling. Her wrists ached where the cuffs had been. Her face felt stiff, numb. She could still hear the sound of impact in her head, looping endlessly. A guard appeared at the door. "You're being transferred." "Where?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Downtown." Evelyn swallowed. "Am I being charged?" The guard paused. "Multiple counts." The word multiple echoed long after the door closed again. Jordan stood when the meeting ended, steadying herself against the table for just a moment before straightening. The others pretended not to notice. Respect in this room looked like discretion. "Next steps?" one of them asked. Jordan reached for her coat. "Full transparency. No statements that soften reality. No delays." They nodded. She left the room and walked slowly down a quiet corridor, footsteps echoing faintly. Each step carried weight, not of guilt, of responsibility. Outside, the press waited in a loose, restless pack. Cameras lifted as soon as she appeared. Voices called her name. Questions overlapped, urgent and hungry. Jordan stopped. The noise dimmed, not because they chose silence, but because authority had a way of commanding it without asking. "I will make a statement later today," she said, voice steady despite the ache behind her eyes. "Right now, I'm going to the hospital." Someone shouted a question about Evelyn, another about Arthur, another about policy failures. Jordan met the crowd with an unflinching gaze. "Accountability applies to everyone," she said, "including institutions." She turned and walked away, the cameras following until the doors closed behind her. At the hospital, fluorescent lights hummed softly. Scans confirmed what Jordan already suspected. Fracture, concussion, treatable. Time would do most of the work. As she lay back against the pillow, exhaustion finally overtook adrenaline. Her phone buzzed once on the bedside table. A single message. Proceeding as authorized. She closed her eyes. Across the city, the Crawfords' world continued to contract. Accounts locked. Properties flagged. Invitations rescinded. Friends grew distant. Silence replaced access. Evelyn sat alone in a cell that smelled faintly of bleach and regret, replaying every choice that had led her there. She had believed power was something you wore, something others recognized on sight. She had never considered that real power moved quietly, waiting. Arthur stared at a wall that had no windows, finally understanding that systems did not forgive arrogance. They only recorded it. And somewhere beyond the noise and spectacle, Jordan Hale rested, gathering strength not for revenge, but for what came next. The story was no longer about one flight, one strike, one woman's fall. It was about what happened after the cameras moved on. The reckoning was just beginning. 6 months later, the courtroom felt colder than the holding cell ever had. Jordan Hale sat in the front row, hands folded loosely in her lap, posture straight, expression unreadable. The faint scar along the bridge of her nose had faded to a thin, pale line, visible only if you knew to look for it. She wore a simple dark suit, unadorned, no jewelry beyond a watch. Nothing about her appearance asked for attention, yet the room seemed oriented around her presence all the same. Behind her, benches were full. Reporters, observers, law students, a few former executives who no longer wore confidence the way they once had. The air carried the low hum of anticipation, not excitement, but gravity. This was not spectacle. This was resolution. Evelyn Crawford sat at the defense table, shoulders slumped, hair pulled back without care. The tailored elegance that once defined her had been replaced by something shapeless and gray. She stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused, jaw tight. She did not look at Jordan. She had not looked at her once since the arraignment. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The sound of chairs scraping against the floor echoed briefly, then stopped. The charges were read. Interference with flight crew. Assault causing bodily injury within federal jurisdiction. Aggravating factors. Each word landed cleanly, methodically, dismantling the illusion that this had been a misunderstanding or a momentary lapse. Video evidence played on a large screen. The slap, the gasp, the blood. Evelyn closed her eyes as her own voice filled the room, sharp and cruel, preserved perfectly by a dozen phones that never looked away. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others watched without blinking. Jordan did not move. When the prosecution called her to the stand, she rose smoothly and walked forward, every step measured. She placed her hand on the Bible, took the oath, and sat. She spoke clearly, calmly. She described the incident as she had described it every time before. No embellishment, no dramatics, no anger. The facts did their work without assistance. The defense attempted to frame it as provocation, stress, alcohol, a misunderstanding inflamed by circumstances. Jordan listened, eyes steady. When it was her turn to respond, she leaned slightly toward the microphone. "None of those factors remove responsibility," she said. "They explain behavior. They do not excuse it." The judge watched her closely. At sentencing, Evelyn finally looked at Jordan. Her eyes were red. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she said. "I lost control." The judge's reply was firm. "Loss of control does not negate accountability." The sentence was read. Federal prison, restitution, mandatory counseling, no ambiguity, no leniency wrapped in language. Evelyn's shoulders shook as she was led away. There was no outburst, no final plea. Just the quiet collapse of someone who had run out of narratives. 2 courtrooms down the hall, Arthur Crawford's fate was sealed with less ceremony. Financial crimes, wire fraud, obstruction, a plea deal that spared him a longer sentence but stripped him of everything else. Assets seized, holdings liquidated. A name once spoken with deference, now reduced to a cautionary reference. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited again. Jordan stepped into the sunlight and paused. The noise surged toward her. "Do you feel vindicated? Was it worth it? Do you think this will change anything?" She considered the questions for a moment, then answered the last one. "Change doesn't happen all at once," she said. "It happens when people realize they're being watched by the same rules they expect others to follow." She turned and walked away. That evening, Jordan sat alone in her apartment, city lights flickering beyond the window. A thick textbook lay open on the table. Neurosurgery protocols, margins filled with notes in her precise handwriting. She had returned to her studies weeks earlier, quietly, without announcement. Life, after all, did not pause for reckoning. Her phone buzzed. A message from a foundation administrator. Scholarship funds fully allocated. First cohort selected. She smiled, just slightly. Somewhere else, Behind reinforced walls and locked doors, Evelyn Crawford lay on a narrow bunk, staring at a ceiling that never changed. The world she had known was gone. Not taken. Revealed for what it was. Arthur Crawford sat in a different facility. Older now, thinner, learning how silence feels when it is not chosen. And across the country, conversations continued. In offices, in homes, in quiet moments when people reconsidered past behavior. The flight had ended long ago, but its impact moved forward, carried by memory, by record, by consequence. Jordan turned a page, pen scratching softly against paper, and kept going. The plane lifted smoothly into the late afternoon sky, sunlight spilling across the wing like a promise kept. Jordan Hale sat by the window. Seat 14. This time, not first class, not hidden, just present. A simple sweater, dark jeans. No entourage. No curtain separating her from anyone else. The cabin hummed with the familiar rhythm of ordinary travel, the sound of people going somewhere without realizing how fragile the idea of safety and dignity really was. A flight attendant stopped beside her row, mid-30s, professional, warm. "Can I get you anything, doctor?" Jordan looked up from the book resting open on her lap. Advanced neurosurgery protocols, dense, precise, the kind of book that demanded focus and rewarded patience. "Just water, please," she said, "and an extra napkin." The attendant smiled, genuine this time, and moved on. Jordan leaned her head lightly against the window. The faint scar along her nose caught the light, a thin silver line she no longer tried to hide. It didn't make her smaller. It made her exact. She had passed her boards 3 weeks earlier. Quietly. No press release. No celebration beyond a short dinner with people who knew how much the journey had cost her. The settlement money from the case had already been allocated. Scholarships. Medical students from backgrounds that never came with safety nets. Students who had been told, explicitly or otherwise, that they did not belong. She believed in systems, but only when they were forced to work. As the plane leveled off, she closed her eyes briefly, letting the low vibration steady her thoughts. Somewhere below, cities moved on, headlines replaced by newer ones, outrage diluted by time. That was always how it went. But some things did not fade. Some moments left residue. Evelyn Crawford now woke every morning to the same walls, the same sounds, the same absence of control. The world had shrunk to schedules and silence. The mirrors showed a woman she no longer recognized. No stylists, no armor. Just consequences. Arthur Crawford spent his days learning the shape of regret, discovering how quickly influence evaporated when money stopped answering his calls. His name appeared in textbooks now, not as an example of success, but of collapse. Neither of them occupied Jordan's thoughts often. She did not need them to. Justice did not require obsession. It required follow-through. The man across the aisle shifted, clearing his throat, glancing at her book. "That looks intense," he said, half smiling. "It is," Jordan replied. "But it's worth it." He nodded, satisfied with that answer. The plane continued forward, cutting through a band of clouds that briefly obscured the sun before releasing it again, brighter than before. Jordan watched the light change and thought about the moment on the aircraft months earlier, when everything had tilted, when a single act of cruelty had collided with a structure designed to hold people accountable. Not everyone had the resources she did. Not everyone could reveal a badge or make a call that froze an entire system in place. That truth sat with her, heavy and unresolved. It was why she kept working, why she refused to disappear into comfort. Power did not belong to the loudest voice in the room. It belonged to the person willing to stand still when tested, to let the truth speak without dressing it up. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and routine. Estimated arrival time. Weather conditions. Nothing extraordinary. Jordan smiled faintly. Extraordinary moments rarely announced themselves. They arrived disguised as inconvenience, as conflict, as silence that dared someone to break it. She returned to her book, pen moving steadily, marking passages, building something that would outlast outrage. Outside the window, the horizon stretched wood and indifferent, a reminder that the world kept moving, whether people learned or not. As the plane carried her forward, the story did not end. It simply passed into memory, into record, into the quiet accumulation of moments that changed how people treated each other when they thought no one important was watching. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you that dignity is not a privilege and power does not always announce itself, take a second to like and subscribe so more stories like this can be told, and leave a comment below with 3 simple words. Stay humble, always.